to An Oral History of the Church. I'm Jonathan McCormick.
And I'm Adam Christman.
An Oral History of the Church is a conversational history podcast. This first volume is an oral history of the campus relocation of Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary's main campus from Mill Valley, California to Ontario, California. The school has a new name as of June 2016. It is Gateway Seminary of the Southern Baptist Convention.
The 15th episode for this volume is an interview with Dr. Kelly Campbell, Associate Dean of Information Services and Director of the Library at Columbia Theological Seminary, and also the previous Library Director for Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary.
I'm looking forward to this interview. I thought it was worthwhile. I think it's important to get the perspective of a diverse group of people, different positions, different backgrounds. Kelly brings something, being a woman, having a different perspective in that way. She's an administrative member of the seminary instead of teaching faculty, which we had with our other faculty members.
Mm-hmm. Plus, she was a student services-oriented staff member.
Yeah.
Her whole job was interfacing with students and providing them the support that they needed as regards research.
Yes.
So, yeah, she was, as the previous library director, she was there for 10 years, which is a solid slice of the institution's history, including the history of the institution at that particular location in Mill Valley.
And is a pretty decent tenure for someone in that position.
Mm.
I don't believe the average service as library director is 10 years at any of the ATS schools.
Yeah. Wow.
She showed some loyalty to the institution.
That's right. Kelly used to be your boss,
mm-hmm.
and used to be my boss, actually. You are currently working for the seminary library, and you came in under her time as library director. I had previously worked for her, starting as a circulation clerk and working my way up to circulation services supervisor. So you and I have each worked for her, actually, coincidentally. It was a blast to be able to work with her and to work under her and learn from her. So for that reason and the reasons you've already mentioned, I'm excited to have her as a part of our study, looking at who the seminary was in that place and during this period in her history.
Then let's give a listen to Dr. Kelly Campbell. This is Jonathan McCormick interviewing Dr. Kelly Campbell on August 19th, 2016. This interview is taking place online. Dr. Campbell, thank you for meeting with me.
Thank you for having me.
Adam Christman is not available for our interview this week, so it'll just be you and I. Thank you for making the time with us.
Mm-hmm.
How did you first hear of Golden Gate Seminary?
I imagine since I'm a lifetime Southern Baptist, I'd probably heard of it before, but my first memory of it is when I was working in Denver, Colorado. I was working at the Denver Public Library, and a college roommate of mine, her husband was attending the Rocky Mountain campus of Golden Gate, and they needed a librarian. They were trying to set up the library. And so he contacted me to see if I would be willing to volunteer. And so from that, I went and met with the director of the campus at that time, which is Emerson Falls. And then I decided to go ahead and help them catalog and set up the library on a volunteer basis. And then when I started to do the actual work, they had a new director, which is Dr. Steve Bettito.
That is a beautiful campus and library. They've I've really appreciated the work that they've done there. So thank you for setting that up. And having just finished setting up a library, I know that's a little bit of work.
A little bit of work. The executive director, well, we had a flood there at one time, and the executive director of the Colorado Baptist Convention, Mark, came down, and his comment was, we were like the Israelites in the desert. We might have to move the books 40 times or 40 years or something like that before it was set. And I was hoping that wouldn't come to fruition.
I don't want to think about the number of times I've moved the same book over the last 3 months.
Yep. So I have it on my resume, and I don't want to add it on my resume again.
Now, how did you come to, you also were a student here, correct? How did you come to study at Golden Gate?
When I started helping the seminary, I decided I wanted to come back and take some classes. I had 3 years at Oklahoma Baptist University, so I had New Testament, Old Testament, some church history, but I was interested in just furthering my own knowledge, and so I started taking the church history with Dr. Earl Wagner was the first class that I taught there. And so I was taking classes, just one a semester at the time that I was still volunteering and setting up the campus.
Okay. And then after serving as the librarian at the Rocky Mountain campus, you moved to the main campus, correct? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I volunteered there maybe 6 months and worked, and then I started working there part-time. There was a family, Greg and Melinda Smith, who helped. Greg was a student there. Melinda Smith was very active. She was one of the few people I met in my life that could work faster than me and keep up with things. And so she would come and volunteer in the library, and we would catalog and get everything set up. And then as I was working there, the current library director, Barbara Dabney, came for a visit and told me that she was probably going to be leaving Golden Gate in the next year, and she wanted me to apply for the position. And so when she left the next year, I applied for the position to be the director of the library for the entire Golden Gate system. And Dr. Rick Dersh, Dr. Michael Kuykendall, and Dr. Gary Urbino were my interview committee. And so I did the interview with them remotely, was flown out for a one-day faculty gauntlet type of interview that happens in academic institutions. And I was offered the position. I accepted it in November of 2003. And then I actually moved to the California Mill Valley campus in the December or January of that year.
Very good. And your current relationship with now Gateway Seminary would be what?
My current relationship would just be as an alumni of the institution. I have a master's degree from Golden Gate, as it was called at that time, but I have no formal relationship with them or current position or role.
And the degree you earned was which degree again?
And look and see. Master's of Arts in Theological Science. No studies. See, that's what confuses me. I hold a master's in library science, but it's a master's of art in theological studies. Is the second one. So
I can understand that. Now, this oral history is looking at the main campus and its relocation. So what are some of your favorite memories of studying or working at the Mill Valley campus of Golden Gate Seminary?
One of my favorite memories of working there, which stands out, is I had been there a couple of years, and I was home one evening, and the evening person called and said that the skunk had walked in the front door of the library. And at the main campus, there was not air conditioning, so we let the doors open, and we had birds flying all the time. But a skunk had walked in, and he wondered what he needed to do. And being surrounded by Marin County, which was very open to animals and would have a different solution than maybe I would have had to taking care of the skunk. He didn't know what to do, so he had called campus security, and campus security had come over, and the person that evening was an international student, and they didn't know, and so other students were coming around, but before they could get there, this security officer had cornered the skunk, which decided to spray and protect itself. So then they were able to herd the skunk back out the front door. I had called maintenance. They didn't know what to do. And so the next day they went ahead and shut down the library. And the next day when I came to work, the building was closed, but I could smell the skunk as I was getting out of my car. And so maintenance came and sprayed down with some vinegar or something around to get rid of the smell. We had all the doors and fans going for a couple of days. And a student, I'm thinking I wonder, it was Adam or it was Michael, walked in the next day with a gas mask over their face to come study in the library because of the skunk smell. So that was one of the memories of, they didn't teach me how to take care of a skunk walking in your library in library school. And then it was a couple of weeks later that Dr. Michael Martin, who was the academic dean, said to me, I heard you had something in the library, and administration had no clue what had happened with the skunk in the library. So that's one of the memories that stands out to me.
Adam has told me that story a couple times, sometimes at my prompting. He has quite vivid memories of the smell as well.
Yeah, it was, and we were very fortunate that it did it in the cafeteria or the cafe area, not on any of the books. I don't know how you get skunk smell out of the book, and I don't want to know how you do that, but at least it wasn't part of the collection. But it was quite a memory for the campus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember covering that in disaster management training.
No, not so much.
What is your most prized achievement that you earned while you were at the Mill Valley campus? This could be something, some sort of thing literal, like a plaque on the wall, or something more figurative that you've accomplished that you look back with pride.
I think there's two things for me. The first is maybe professional achievement. One was when I was elected to the faculty, and to be a single woman in a Southern Baptist institution, to be elected to the faculty was a professional accomplishment for me. Yeah. Another one with that was I would meet on a monthly basis with the academic council, and the academic council was comprised of the dean, the registrar, the library director, and then the program directors. And we would vet different budget requests. And at one point, I had asked for a discovery system for 2 or 3 years, an upgrade to the actual library catalog. And the third year that came around, I didn't have to speak for that. All of the faculty, that became their #1 priority. So that spoke to me, and it reinforces that in an institution, students and faculty have a much broader voice than a director of the library. And if you can have them fight your battles or take up your causes, you're going to get a lot farther than you as one voice speaking. Personally, I think one of my most prized or something I'm proud of is the people who have come through and worked at the Golden Gate campus library. There were a lot of circulation supervisors, circulation clerks, a lot of individuals that have come through, but they have gone on, and I feel like we were able to develop a good team, and we were able to empower people. So one of the circulation supervisors had worked at our Pacific Northwest campus, came to complete his THM at the Mill Valley campus. Then he went on to do his PhD through a connection that we had helped do at Fuller Seminary. So Fuller helped pay for his PhD, and then now he's ended up being the director and is working on his library degree, but he's the library director at Fuller Seminary. So there were lots of voices and faces that came through during the time that I was there, and hopefully the time that they spent working in the library impacted their life and made them better for whatever they ended up wanting to be.
This may be a part of just who we've got to respond, but one of the things I've enjoyed hearing is people saying things like this, that their deep accomplishments have been their relationships and empowering people. I'm thinking of our interview particularly right now with Dr. Hoff. So I appreciate.
I think that's a value of Golden Gate as an institution. It probably was a particular value of the culture and the context that the Mill Valley campus was placed in. And reflecting on the campus, and this may be later, but a former library director that left Golden Gate campus, the Mill Valley, in not the best circumstances, posted after he had come to visit during the transition in the cell. But his words were very true, that there was a specialness about that particular location, and that God put that location there, and then man came along and took advantage of that. And I think that's true. It wasn't, there are lots of institutions and buildings and seminaries across the country and around the world, but there was a uniqueness, there was a unique spirit already in that property, in that location, the beauty, the culture, things that you can't maybe find in other places. And that time came to a close with that campus closing there. So,
yeah, thank you. On that kind of note, since we're talking about the property and the locale, before the announced sale of the Mill Valley campus, April 1st, 2014, what was your impression of the relationship between Golden Gate Seminary's Mill Valley campus and our neighbors?
My impression always that there was not a wonderful relationship. I was very aware of, when I joined the campus there, that Dr. Cruz had spent countless hours out attending local meetings, making relationships, developing partnerships, but it was never an easy relationship. It was always a little bit uneasy. I would hear about students moving to the area and talking about how hard it was to make the transition. The culture of the area was so opposite than the culture of the campus. I think it takes someone very unique to be able to find the sameness. So the environment is an area that could be the same, and same values that you could leverage on. So it was not an easy relationship. Being on the faculty, I was probably more aware of the relationship and the difficulties the 2 or 3 years before the announced sale that were shared about trying to develop the property and how things were not going well at that part in that relationship as well.
Well, thank you. How did that relationship change after the announcement of the sale?
I left in 2013. I'm not quite aware. It was interesting to me. I came to visit this campus in March of this year, and the neighbors who were still fighting against any development on the property at all, no matter who owns it, still had seminaryneighbors.org as their website. And the sale had been announced for 2 years, and in June the campus was moving, but they still considered it Seminary Neighbors. It's still a Seminary Drive. I wonder if God strategically has not, who knows in future generations what seeds may have been planted, because that seminary was there for a long time, that institution, that campus, and we don't know. That will be in the future to see how it changes in the long term, but it had not definitely changed in the short term.
That's an interesting perspective for that.
Someone who's been outside of the cell rather than in the middle of the transition.
Were you party to the discussion of the potential sale before it was finalized?
No. I had heard the whole 10 years that I was at the campus, there had been discussions the whole life of the seminary, because I was aware of the history of how we purchased the land and all of that had happened. So there was always the rumor that the seminary would sell at some point. The difficulty was that you have to sell to a certain person. It has to be approved. It was a lot of steps to get through, and you have to have a lot of cash. So I wasn't privy to that. The sale was happening as I look back now, because when I submitted my resignation, Dr. Martin had come to me because I had not actually given him my resignation letter, and he was asking me if I was going to change my mind and stay. And then when the sale was announced, I thought, oh, there was more going on than I was privy to on the discussion of the potential sale.
I have a parallel observation, but I'm going to save that for my interview when I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We more or less expect not to hear anyone being direct party to it, because that's what Dr. Rogers said was part of it. But again, for the historical purposes, we're trying to verify Dr. Rogers' claim.
No, I think that's exactly right. And every institution and something like that is such a big change that there's a lot of discussion that happens.
What was your opinion of, you've shared a little bit of this, but what was your opinion of the sale at the time? Did you think it was a good idea? How did you feel?
At the time, I was not surprised. At the time, I thought it was a huge challenge, and it was going to be interesting to see that happen. So I think your next question is talking about since. So I've changed a little bit of my opinion since that time, but at the time of the announcement, any of that is a little bit of a shock, even if you had suspected it and wondered about it for years, that it actually is going to happen. But I was just real curious about this experiment and to see how it's going to work out in the long term.
What is your opinion now? The change has happened. We're having new student orientation at the Ontario campus right now. The Mill Valley campus will have it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. My opinion has softened a little bit, but I still think it's a great experiment. One of the things because I have a doctorate in organizational leadership, one of the challenges of this to me is the leadership. Yeah. And Dr. Orge was specifically selected, and I have this actually from Dr. Cruz in conversations, was specifically selected for the man to lead the next chapter of this institution. And they knew that the building or the location was going to be the challenge of his tenure. And so we're seeing the results of that. But the opinion of the sale, I think the campus at Mill Valley is one model. The campus at Ontario is 100% a different model. Yes. I'm not saying either model is good or bad, but there are things that you're going to lose or you're going to gain. And only time will tell whether that experiment from switching from this model to that model is going to be successful. And the other part is I'm at an institution right now that talks about community all the time, but they don't really get it. There was a community at that Mill Valley campus that will be lost. And I don't know the cost of that versus having a new campus, not having the overhead, the structure. I can rationalize that. I'm just curious to see how God uses that and changes that in the future and what he will do with it.
It is going to be a very different seminary, for better or for worse, or perhaps a little bit of both.
I think you're right in that you say it's not so much a campus moving, it was a organizational culture change for an institution. And from the outside, people can say, oh, it's the same. Even though it has a different name, it's the same place. It is not the same place. It will attract different people as faculty. It will attract different students. And I think part of that is intentional, but I think some of that was necessary because of the location and the switch. So I don't know how much of that the leadership could control and how much of that was determined by the location and the relocation. And that may be God's providence as he's changing the institution for the future, and that's the way he's leading through that. But it will, who knows, we'll see 20 years from now what happens.
Well, whoever gets to write that institutional history, hopefully will have some assistance with this oral history project.
That's exactly right.
All seminaries have constituencies. A confessional institution, one that represents a particular denomination, answers to its members across the country. And all institutions have their best interest of keeping good relationship with the alumni. Since you're both of those still, Southern Baptist and you're an alumnus, what do you hope the seminary will prioritize as they make this historic transition?
One of the things I hoped that they had prioritized, they didn't. And I'm very sad, and I've heard from alumni about this. The last year that they were on that property, they did not make an effort to reach out nationally and internationally to alumni to come and close that door and to complete that journey with them. So events, there was an alumni lunch that was held at the May or June. If you were not in the immediate area, you didn't know the lunch was happening. The Intersect conference that happened in February that was a missions and people were coming back. Another alumni lived in San Francisco, and if a faculty member had not called her, she would have not known about the event and come. And so to me, yes, you have to look forward, but I wish they had made a priority of closing the historical piece better. The former library director that I mentioned, he just happened to drive up on his own. The library was already packed. They could have closed and secured some of the alumni and supporters of the institution historically during that last year in that location. Granted, I will give them a little grace because they had 1,000 things going on with picking up a campus and moving it. But I don't know that there was an intentional structure to reach out across the nation. And the institution is known for having people everywhere, but I don't know that anyone everywhere could have known far enough ahead of time to buy an airline ticket if they wanted to come see the last time that they saw something on the campus. And I think what you're doing right now is preserving that oral and historical transition. And I wish there had been an institutional initiative and perspective of that. Because what happens is a 75th or 100th anniversary is going to come up and there's not going to be documentations. I'm not for sure, other than friends posting on Facebook, I never saw anything historically coming from the Golden Gate side that says, here's the things and help us join our story. Development wise, there could have been, a whole campaign, help us continue our story and help us move forward into our next location. And that was some missed opportunities to me. I think some of the things going forward for them to prioritize is going to be this sense of specialness and community. As we've just talked about, not only did one campus within a system move, but the culture and the focus and the methodology of that institution changed. So they may lose some supporters and some alumni while they may gain new ones in this new. And so how do they balance that transition? One of the big books is Managing Transition, and this is one of the large ones that's coming out there. So those are some of the things, the specialness. I am planning to visit the Ontario campus and the new campus in October. And I imagine I will have a very different reaction than when I would come to the campus in Mill Valley. And so how does that attract, and how do they bring the people who built it and the people who have come before, how do they join them onto the new journey? I guess it's Friday afternoon, maybe I'm tired, but I'm thinking about it's like the Israelites leaving Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got to keep the people moving forward, but you've also got to remember the memorials and the tributes and the sacrifices of the ones that came before you.
I have had several conversations with the new circulation librarian during this transition process, trying to pass on my institutional memory to him. And
Mm-hmm.
I anecdotally have heard of this happening with others. I'm pleased about the number of people that we were able to keep on,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have that sort of handoff.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for your observation regarding alumni. I hope that can be part of what we observe for the future.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? Anything else you have to say on this issue?
No, you were talking about my opinion. I will always call it Golden Gate because it was Golden Gate when I worked there, and it was Golden Gate when I left there. So I know new people that are still there need to make the transition. But again, I think there's a section of the population that will know it as that. It's not that we're against the new name. It's just this is how we experience the institution, and someone's going to experience it differently. So I think there's going to some grace and some time will tell a lot of different things. But I'm very, very impressed that y'all are doing the oral history, and I'm very grateful because I know how important the historical perspectives are, and to be able to hear the voices and to hear the names, because those get lost in the history.
Well, thank you, Dr. Campbell. It's been a pleasure sitting down and interviewing you. We'll have this up online soon.
Okay.
That was Dr. Kelly Campbell, previous library director at Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary.
Jonathan, I really am glad that Kelly got to be a part of our study. She had a lot of connections. I mean, if you're there in a place for 10 years, in any job for 10 years, you're going to get a lot of connections with people of all different sorts. And it's certainly true of Kelly.
Agreed.
As you've already mentioned, her perspective on it is a unique contribution for its combination of all the different factors we've already talked about. But what about you? What did you especially like about this interview with Kelly?
I really enjoy hearing the story about the skunk, probably more than is healthy.
That may be true.
Though I suppose that may just be because I wasn't there to see the skunk.
Yeah, or to smell the skunk, more specifically, my friend. Let me remind you, that was when I was the supervisor at the time. Although I was not in the building. I had nothing to do with all the mistakes that led up to the skunk venting itself in the coffee lounge or the lobby. There's really no difference, especially when we're talking skunk.
It is encouraging to me to see that it is possible to progress up the ranks through a seminary's institution, through a seminary's infrastructure, to go from being a volunteer at a campus to being a faculty member at the campus. That's a pretty big step.
Yeah.
I also appreciated her statement about the fact that the seminary is a special place.
Mm.
There's a gravitas to the site. There's a beauty of the view.
Mm-hmm.
The buildings have, though they need repair, they really served very well for their time frame.
Sure.
And though I don't think I have as extreme of perspective as she does about the engagement with alumni. I I have to agree with her that there probably could have been better outreach with alumni and former faculty and staff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was difficult for the seminary because they had a staff the size that they had, and they needed all hands on deck to make everything work towards the relocation.
There weren't many people wandering the halls weeping over the loss of the institution in the 2 years running up to the move. It was,
yeah. There were too many there were too many things to do. It's kind of a shame on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's okay. If they had the budget for another office of, I don't know, 4 people to get the word out to alumni and past faculty and whatnot, and coordinate more events or deeper events, they would have, but that's not the way it was able to go out this time for this seminary.
Perhaps the next institution that moves can learn from our example.
Yeah, maybe.
Our next episode is a PhD candidate from Gateway Seminary, a graduate with a Master of Divinity from Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary, a former staff member of Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary. How else can I pour on accolades on my co-host here?
He's a pretty swell dude, especially in the muscles. He has hit up the gym and has become swole thereby,
and has a truly magnificent philosopher's beard.
Yes, exactly. So even just as a pretty face in the background, I can hang with the hefty philosophers of our day.
Our next interview will be with Adam Christman.
It's true. Sorry, folks. You can skip that episode if you want. But just so you know, these are the final episodes. This one and the subsequent 2 are the final episodes of the Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary campus relocation project, the first volume for our podcast. So if you're wanting to catch the whole thing, we're almost done. It's 2 more episodes to go after this one. The one after this one will, perhaps unfortunately for your ears and brains, will be with me. But the final one is with my co-host Jonathan, which will be, from his perspective, all of the questions that we've been asking the whole way through. So our template will remain the same for the interview with me and the interview with Jonathan. But also in Jonathan's episode, we will have kind of a wrap-up and a look back at the project as a whole, where we discuss what we learned and what we saw, maybe what we hoped to see but didn't.
We want to work the method all the way through to the end, and that would include debriefing us and telling about our portion of what we saw of the history. Adam and I, we're students. We have a perspective, and we think it's one worth hearing, and if no one else records it, it won't be saved for posterity. And I hope that in aggregate, this will work as a snapshot of what people thought about the relocation at this time.
Yes.
In this way.
Yeah.
So episode 16 with Adam Christman will be available 1 week from today on September 16th. Nice synchronicity there. As we've said so many times before, thank you again for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you can get these last 2 episodes to hear our take on the process. And so you can hear about the next segment of our podcast. We're going to be moving ahead with another volume with new topics, new interviews. And if you've found this helpful, you think that history is important and want other people to know about it, please rate and review on iTunes or YouTube or however you choose to listen to our podcast, so that other people can receive the same blessing you've received.
Yeah. Well, for Jonathan and for myself, this is so long for another week. May God bless you as you go. He's already gone before.